Okay, today I'm with Tom Waterhouse of the Waterhouse bookmaking dynasty from Australia. Thanks very much for agreeing to do this, Tom. Can I go straight into the first question, please, and say, some people say that you've had a great advantage being from a family of great bookmakers. Did you find it a huge added pressure to succeed and live up to your forefathers?
No, I don't think I did. I found the pressure from the family in a sense that they're really hard workers. Like, my mum gets up at 2:05 a.m. every morning. My dad gets up at about 3 a.m. every morning, and they're so successful and been successful for a long period of time, yet they continue to work really hard. And so not working hard was not an option. It didn't matter what we did. It was very clear that you have to work hard and be committed to doing it. But it wasn't any sort of pressure to be in racing whatsoever.
That's what I was going to ask. With such a heritage, not only in bookmaking but also your mum training, was there any doubt you'd be involved in the business? And were you not tempted to skip university altogether and just get stuck in straight away?
So as a kid, I didn't like racing at all. I used to think it was crazy that my parents would talk about racing all the time, and I used to complain, can't you talk about something more interesting than horse racing? And then I was 6 months into my first year at uni, and my dad said, look, come out to the racetrack and give it a go. And I went out there and I just loved it. There was just so much money, so much action, the theatre of the betting ring. And I said to him, I go, look, if you don't mind, can I come out as many days as possible? And so I rearranged my university timetable, and when I wasn't at university, I was at the racetrack or at the dog track, going to as many meetings as possible. And that really became the interest of my life. I loved it. And then my mum would complain, look, you guys never stop talking about odds, being me and my dad. And look, I never thought to leave university early because I'd committed to start it, and therefore I wanted to finish it. But I definitely knew after a few months at the track that my life would be around horse racing and bookmaking.
So has your degree proved helpful in this career?
I think school and degree, it really gives you that self-confidence that you can follow through on something and finish something. I don't know if day in, day out I go, well, look, I remember what I did in my finance lectures or in commerce lectures or whatever, what the different bits and pieces that I learned in that lecture, but definitely following through and being committed, and also having to juggle. So I was a full-time bookmaker by the time that I finished university, trying to juggle a full-time profession and a university degree. It's a good life lesson, but I don't know if I think I learned a lot more on the job than I did in the lecture room.
Okay, if I forgot my facts correct, you got a on-course bookmaking licence by 2003, and by 2008 you reportedly fielded £20 million over 4 days at the Melbourne Festival, more than all the other bookies combined. How did you get to be so dominant so quickly, and what was your unique selling point?
So it doesn't sound like a long time, but 2003 was really 2001. I was out at the track, and I spent the first few years working with my dad on the bag and then on the ground and writing tickets if he went to the country, which I was very poor at, and on the computer, learning all the different bits and pieces. And my dad gave me is an amazing dad in that he had so much faith in me as a person and as a son. So within 6 weeks of being at the racetrack, he said, look, I have to go away, you can run my stand for me. Now, you can lose a lot of money running a bookmaking stand, and he had that faith for me to give it a try. And then he said to my grandfather, look, come out of retirement and teach your grandson how to be a bookmaker. So I had my dad, who's a form genius and very analytical, and I had my grandfather, who was the biggest bookmaker in the world in the 1960s and 70s. And I had both of them at different points in time teaching me the trade of bookmaking. And so I worked with my dad for a few years, and then I went into partnership with my grandfather in about 2003, and we worked from being the smallest bookmakers to the largest bookmakers in Sydney. And then in 2008 I went down and became a bookmaker in Melbourne. And the thing that learning the lessons of both my father and my dad, I had a good knowledge of bookmaking, and it had really been driven into me to be a bookmaker, big bookmaker, which my grandfather was. But I also had a technology advantage in that I had Betfair was obviously out, and I had access to it. The internet, which New South Wales bookmakers didn't have, I had access to it in Melbourne, and I had the ability to offer customers a very different product set in Melbourne as compared to Sydney. I could offer them a product called Best Tote, and also my dad was a form genius, so I had really good form. I had access to the internet, which the other bookmakers didn't have, access to the exchange, and I had a better product offering than what my counterparts in Sydney had, and the business really just boomed. It went from all the bookmakers combined. We held 20 million over the 4 days of the Melbourne Carnival, more than all the other bookmakers combined, and holding a few $100 million a year as an on-course bookie. And it was tremendous, but like everything, things change, and the internet changed on-course bookmaking, and also the difference in taxes, and the fact that you could advertise the off-course bookmakers, and what was a great business in 2008. By 2009, it was my last year at the on-track bookmaking, and then I shifted to being a telephone-only bookmaker.
So during that time, when you were fielding such colossal amounts of money, did you actually have to have colossal liabilities at the same time?
Yeah, so there was probably about, as an on-course bookmaker, I only had 100 clients betting with me, and then obviously all the on-track money. But you could at the time, I remember being a roll or 2 rolls over the favourite in the Derby, and got 500,000 cash out of that particular runner. And I had, out of the 100 clients, probably half a dozen clients that were very high net worth clients betting in many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So a liability on a day on a particular race wouldn't be unusual to be over $1 million, and probably unusual, but occasionally be 2.5 million you'd be standing a particular horse for. So it was large swings. I know on Derby Day in 2008, lost $2 million on the first day of the carnival, and now you've got 3 big days left to go. So it was definitely it definitely was a really exciting time, and big punters and big betting, and the other bookies were betting big as well. You could get on with other bookmakers for large amounts and get off if you had a big liability. So it was a very exciting time to be at the track.
You mentioned other bookmakers. Was there ever a backlash that this huge force suddenly appeared and were taking money from them?
So I don't think in 2008, no. But what happened is the advertising got allowed for off-track bookmakers in 2008, and really you had the iPhone that came out the year before, and you had the shift to online. And when that shift to online really happened, sort of by 2009, then it was the feeling between on-course bookmakers became a lot tighter, because the same money wasn't being bet around, and but that's part and parcel. There was no sort of specific animosity between myself and another bookmaker. It's the game, isn't it?
Yeah, so you saw the change coming. So in 2010 you launched TomWaterhouse.com, which quickly grew, and then by 2013 it sold it again. How did that sort of transpire?
Yeah, so look, I realised by 2009 that I tried to lay the favourite in the Derby the following year in 2009, and could only get about $5,000 out of the favourite, being a couple rolls over the call, and realised that it was gone on track bookmaking, in not gone completely, but gone to the same way that it was the years before, or even the year prior. And so I went, well, I've got 100 really good big clients, I'll go and become a telephone-only bookmaker. And so I became a telephone-only bookmaker, and then said, well, look, I may as well have an internet offering as well. And that took a while to build, and different skill sets were needed. And launched a very soft launch in 2009 with an internet site, and then launched properly in 2010, not really knowing where it would go. And there was only 3 of us basically in the office there with the internet business, but we spent a little bit, we went on TV. I actually went on a segment with my mum, who's a famous trainer in Australia, and was on the TV with her, and the sign-ups went through the roof. And when I say through the roof, we normally got maybe 1 or 2 a day, and we got 60 on that day. And I went, gosh, TV works. And so we started spending a little bit more on TV, and started off with a $100,000 marketing budget in about March 2011. And literally the business then took off. We went from 3 people to over 100 people working with us, and went from 100 customers to 250,000 customers in 18 months, and our marketing budget went from 100,000 to sort of 20 million a year marketing budget. So it was a really big growth period, and the business went really well, and it was a really exciting time. Just it feels like a blur now, but it was a really exciting time. So I had the telephone business and had this online business that was growing, and really the point of difference about in the online business was there was an individual that was behind it and branded as such, and also that it was we knew that the TV assets worked, and we bought up all the big TV assets. We got the rugby league, the AFL, we had the tennis, and just bought these major media assets because we knew that the likes of Paddy Power, Bet365, William Hill would probably come to Australia, or had already come, or had already come, and that there were only a certain amount of TV assets in the country. So it was an exciting ride.
Okay, so you mentioned William Hill. You've built this really successful business in a matter of 3 or 4 years. What made you decide to take on the CEO of William Hill and not solely concentrate on building your own empire further?
So what happened is that we all these overseas operators operated at such larger scale than what we operated at. So we probably spend a few $100,000 a year on our platform, maybe at the most $1 million a year on our platform. And you see the large companies, they're spending X $100 million a year in expenses in Australia. And so saw that these big companies came in and realised that they how much we had to scale up, and the amount of investment we needed to make was significantly more than what we had been making, and realised we needed to come up with come into the market with a partner. And we looked around at who'd be the best partner, and William Hill. It was a long sale process, but William Hill turned out they made us an offer for the business, and that sale process went for probably 9 months, and from our point of view, it was a terrific result, sort of to start the business a couple of years prior and sell out to a major public listed company like William Hill that had the heritage and the background that William Hill had, and also expertise in areas that we didn't have. And so we sold the business in 2013, and we're in an earn-out for a year, and then their CEO said, would you like to come on board and run the business in Australia? They bought us, and they bought the sporting bet business, which had Centrebet as well. And I'd never had a corporate career at all, and some members of my family said, well, look, don't be ridiculous, why would you go and work for someone else? But at the same time, could see the sense in that you can learn a lot by working with a big company and see how big companies operate, both good and bad. And it was a great learning experience being CEO of William Hill Australia for the last few years, and learn a lot, made a lot of great friends and contacts, and saw some of the really terrific advantages that big public listed companies have with that scale, and also the disadvantages that they have. So, but it was a terrific experience, and yeah, obviously feel very privileged that they asked me to do the role, and that I could spend that amount of time running that business.
And some people find it very difficult to sort of transition. So what would be, how much different is it from running your own business to running William Hill with regards to the shareholders and be judged by investors?
Yes, I think there's a lot more structure, obviously, in large companies, and there's in a way a lot more red tape, but there's probably in many ways a lot more strategic thought about what you're going to do, because you have to get so many stakeholders on board to try and do something, and that comes with huge advantages in that you've got a lot of people thinking about where you're going to go and how to plan, and disadvantages in that you're very nimble when you're a small operation or a startup, and you can move very quickly, and that's the biggest. It's like you're in a little speedboat compared to a big ocean liner, and both have their advantages and disadvantages. But one of the amazing things I saw with William Hill is the global network and the structure of being an international business. So in Australia, we started out with a couple of people in the Philippines, in Manila, and we grew that business in Manila to being over 150 people. And the skill sets that you find in Asia, especially the Philippines, were amazing, and they had offices in Tel Aviv, and obviously Gibraltar, and in many other parts. Also, obviously, it's extensive here in the UK. And seeing that international skill sets and what that scale gives you, big companies have a big advantage in that sense.
Okay, changing track slightly, it seems from what I've read, and obviously very comfortable in front of the camera, you seem to enjoy the media aspect of your career. Do you think it's important to keep a high public profile?
Look, one of the things about selling the business, TomWaterhouse.com, I sold my name. So, and I thought, well, I'm going to be out of the limelight now and having a good corporate job with William Hill, and I've got a great wife and 3 kids. I thought, well, look, I'm going to stay under the radar, but I'm very privileged. I come from a family that's really well known in Australia, in a long line of bookmakers, and my mum and her father have been champion horse trainers. So no matter how much I stayed out of the limelight, there was still publicity and press around myself and the family, and that's a great advantage. Obviously, every great advantage comes with a disadvantage as well, but and so when I was able to get my brand and domain back and IP back, is that it's such a big advantage that name is well known and known in the space, and yeah. So even though it's not always comfortable being in front of the camera and putting your name out there and putting yourself out there, it's a big advantage, and I feel very, very thankful that I've got my brands and my business back. So
in a different world, would you quite fancy a job in the media?
No, definitely not. Going on TV or in the camera is just so nerve-wracking. I was in it feels like when I was a kid, but it would be 12 years ago. I was on Dancing with the Stars in Australia, which is, I think it's called Strictly Come Dancing here, and I just was so sick and nervous before going on TV, and literally went to the bathroom probably 100 times before going out there, and it just is terrifying for me. It's all right speaking to you here now because it's just the two of us, but I find it very nerve-wracking being on TV. But at the same time, when you're trying to promote your business, it's if you're not prepared to do it well, you're in the wrong game. But definitely not. I wouldn't want to be in the media outside from a business perspective.
You've mentioned the global aspect of betting and gambling these days, and I noticed also, looking at your Twitter feed, you've mentioned Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. As the internet has made the industry totally global pretty much now, do you feel that those sort of currencies are the future for trading?
Look, I think in first world countries that where gambling is legal, then probably not, or at least not for a while to come. But what we saw when we were expanding our operations in the Philippines, we went and looked at whether we should expand in India. We spent a lot of time in Taiwan and in China, and we saw that there were these operators that were much smaller than us. So William Hill's got 16,000 people globally. We saw operators that had 50 or 60 people and were turning over astronomical sums betting-wise, and they only offered cryptocurrency. And the reason why they were so successful, I think, is that they were able to access markets where it's either very hard to get a bank account, or it's very hard, if you do have a bank account, to be able to access a gambling or a betting operator. And so with the cryptocurrency operators, you don't even have to sign up. You just have to have, whether it's Bitcoin or Litecoin or any of the cryptocurrencies, and you can bet straight away with these operators, and without having to go through a middleman. And the amount they're turning over is astronomical, but also the limits. For instance, if you're a new customer in Australia and you go and try and bet with one of the corporates or the big bookmakers, you might be able to get on an NBA match to win $10,000. First bet with these cryptocurrency operators, you can get on to win $100,000, $150,000 straight off the bat. So the limits and where they can access revenue from is far more expanded than what the bookmakers in Australia can at the moment. But do I think there's going to be a big shift from local Australian people going to cryptocurrency operators? No, I don't think so, because they can't advertise, obviously, in Australia.
Okay, TomWaterhouse.com is now a tipping site, for want of a better word, where you can go from bronze for a free bet every week to platinum, where somebody will pay $120,000 a year to be personally enrolled with you. It might seem strange to some people coming from a dynasty of bookmakers that you run something like that. How does it sit with running a bookmaking firm?
So I just, obviously getting the brands back, I have a non-compete in Australia for taking bets for 2 years. And I just thought, well, I find it very hard to get on with the bookmakers in Australia because the taxes have gone so much higher. And so because I was being restricted from the bookmakers to be able to bet, I thought, well, there's skills and knowledge that has been passed on to me from the 4 generations of bookmakers that I come from, and my dad, who's obviously a professional punter, and my dad, who is such a large bookmaker, is that there's knowledge that's been passed on to me in how to win betting. And why not offer a service to people that I can say, well, look, this is how you win betting, this is what you need to back, this is how much you have to have on them, and this is the price you need to take. Because really there's 3 ingredients to being a winning punter. You need to have the right tip, you need to know how much to have on it, and you need to take the right price. And most people don't know that. Most people are just happy to have their 20 bucks or 20 pounds on a runner and hope it wins based on the name or the colour or whatever reasons they choose. And you can actually win betting, but there is so few winning punters, and it takes discipline. And what I wanted to try and do, especially during this period that I'm out of taking bets, is show punters and members of TomWaterhouse.com, look, you can win betting, and this is how you go about doing it.
So if you've got clients that are successful following you, there's a lot of danger they'd get their accounts closed down by William Hill.
Look, if they follow the tips exactly as I've said to them, and they get on at the best price, yes, they will find it very hard to get on, like I find it very hard to get on. But most of the punters, I think, that have come through are not looking to do it as a profession. They're looking just to have a better guide of how to be a better punter than what they were before. And if they remain that they're a recreational punter, no, I think that the majority of them will still be able to have their accounts on, but they'll be better, and they'll be a better punter than what they were before.
Have you had any clients for the service that have progressed from bronze to platinum by simply working their way up through and reinvesting their winnings?
So I had plenty of customers that have gone from bronze to whether it's the silver or the gold, but no customers that have gone from bronze yet to emerald and platinum. They've started off at gold and gone to emerald or platinum, but bronze, the highest they've gone from bronze starting out is to go to gold.
Can we ask how many £120,000 customers you've got?
I'm not going to give you the exact number, but it's only 30 days in, and I'm surprised with the take-up, not only the platinum, but surprised with the take-up of the whole business. Really, it's gone a lot better than what I thought, and hopefully I can just keep giving a great service, and it's gone much better than what I thought. But obviously I'm here with a couple of the punters for Ascot this week, and it's been great.
Now, you've mentioned about advertising. Going back a while, you got yourself into a little bit of trouble, even going up to the Australian Prime Minister, with people objecting to the amount of advertising, where you're actually advertising. Is there a fine line between advertising a legitimate business and also having to have some social responsibility?
So I think what happened in Australia is that advertising only just got allowed in 2008, and so you had all of these overseas operators come in, and also local operators come in and start advertising extensively. And because I was as an individual, and it was called, rather than sports bet or sporting bet or TAB sports bet, it was called TomWaterhouse.com. There was a face for people to go, look, we don't like all of this gambling advertising on all the time. And like in anything, when suddenly something's allowed, there's a flood of activity, and then people adapt to what's acceptable. I think from gambling advertising, if you're going to allow gambling in a country, then I think advertising is very important, because it incentivizes those that are regulated and are legal operators to stay in that market where you can tax them. And we talked about cryptocurrency operators before. The major difference between those offshore illegal operators not getting much traction in countries where you're allowed betting is that it's so easy to find because they advertise a legitimate regulated bookmaker that pays taxes. And so without advertising, you're on the same level playing field really as the licensed and the unlicensed. So, and I think in Australia, there's been a huge change in what you're allowed to offer and incentives in the way that you advertise. And I think everything finds its level, doesn't it? I think in Australia, it's probably got to a place that from a consumer point of view, they're not getting bombarded all the time with gambling advertising to the extent they were. And from an operator's point of view, you can still advertise and try and grow your business.
What would the biggest sport to attract Australian gambling dollars be?
So racing obviously is still the largest turnover sport, and then dogs and trots. But the biggest sport would surprise many is actually basketball, and then AFL and rugby league. But basketball is the biggest turnover sport, and the NBA is obviously massive. The amount of games and content that's on, and also it's on a very good time period for us. It's in the mornings our time, and there's not a huge amount of other content during that period. But yeah, basketball is, if you'd said to me 10 years ago basketball would be the most bet sport in Australia, I would have laughed, but yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, that would be quite surprising to a lot of people, I imagine.
Yeah.
And finally, you've achieved a great deal. I think you're only in your mid-30s still. What would you like to go on and do for the rest of your life?
Look, I think I just want to keep growing businesses. I love working. I get out of bed every morning just so excited to be at work. I think like my parents, they love working. They don't need to work, and I don't feel that I need to work. But I just love. It's some people like golf and tennis or whatever. To me, getting out of bed every morning and thinking how can we grow this business is really exciting, and whether it's with the TomWaterhouse.com brand or other businesses, I'm just going to be focused on that.
Brilliant. Tom Waterhouse, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.